am really excited to interview my friend and my colleague, Dr. Isaura Gonzalez today. Dr. Isaura Gonzalez, let me just tell you a little bit about her because I could read her bio, but it's like probably 3 pages long. So I won't do that. But Isaura has a BA and 2 minors, 2 masters, 1 in general experimental and 1 in clinical psychology, and a doctorate in clinical psychology. And she is an alumni of Harvard University's executive education program. And she has just returned back home to her home in New York City after spending a weekend at Harvard University speaking for their, I think it was their Women's Entrepreneur Day. I'm not sure, but we'll confirm that when she comes on. Isaura, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So am I right? Were you there for Women's Entrepreneur Day at Harvard, or what was it that you guys were, because you and Robin were there?
Actually, I met the individuals that do part of the WED, right? The Women's Entrepreneurship Day, which is part of the UN initiative to acknowledge women entrepreneurs around the world. I was there last year with Sharon Lecter, who was one of their keynotes. And in that process, Sharon said to the organizers, they're like, you really need to have a Latina presence, and, here's the woman to bring it to you. So not only did I moderate and speak, but I was actually the organizer for the Latinas and the Latina panelists that were there. So those guests that you saw were actually individuals that I handpicked and asked to be part of this event.
How exciting. That's awesome.
Very exciting. Very exciting. They brought the house down. I mean, they had a roaring standing ovation, and I couldn't have been more thrilled for all of the panelists that were there.
Yeah, you've done so much this year. And I just want to tell the audience how we initially met. Isaura and I are both part of a group called Empowering a Billion Women for 2020. And that Ingrid Vandervelt leads, and we met earlier this year at one of their events. And I just love the work that you're doing with Latinas, and I also love your story. And that's, you were part of our Power Up Your Life virtual conference earlier this year in August. And every time that I talk to you, I just admire you even more because of everything that you're continually doing for Latinas in this country and elsewhere. And, you're a representative that I am very proud of. And so I just want to let you know that I really admire all the work that you're doing for Latinas around the world, because it's not just here in the U.S., but you represent us amazingly everywhere that you go, because, in London, I was there when you did your presentation, and again, just did an amazing job. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much. Hearing words like that, and from other panelists that were there that actually have followed me. I had no clue who they were, but they clearly knew who I was, and, being struck by the impact of the work that I'm doing. And I don't even feel that it's as much as I could do, simply because I still run a very successful private practice, so I have my hands in kind of everything. But thank you so much for your kind words. I mean, service and to be of service is really what I'm about. And I'm glad that I can impact the lives of others in a positive way and move Latinas, such as myself, yourself, shatter that glass ceiling, create new paths for us to go through so that others can walk with confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to take a few seconds now and remind people that one of the reasons that we do interviews like this is to provide access to people like you who are experts in their regarded fields, and we encourage our audience to ask any questions that might come up during the interview process, while we're discussing here. Because that's what we're here for. And that's what I know Isaura loves, is actually being able to help people. And I love being able to help people. So please, if you have any questions or comments, or you have resources that you'd like to share that we might mention, as well as the ones that we're mentioning, please do so, and feel free to do so in the comments below. Whether you're watching this live or you're watching this on demand, please feel free to ask any questions, and we will surely be monitoring them and answering them as they come in. So with that, Isaura, tell people a little bit about your personal story, because like I said, I really admire you and the things that you've been able to accomplish in just a short amount of time. So tell people a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I like to start my story with who I am, right, and where I came from. So I always say conceived in Cuba, born in Spain, and made in the USA. And that's really how my story goes. My family's from Cuba. They left Cuba to find freedom, educational freedom as well. Went to Spain. From Spain, my grandmother was diagnosed here in the US with ovarian cancer. You know, we kind of had to drop everything from what we were doing, came here in the US, and my purpose and my goal was very clear from early on. You know, my family gave up everything in order to give us the freedom of education. So I knew where I wanted to go. I knew my PhD, my PsyD was kind of where educationally I wanted to wind up. And so everything from early on really was tailored to that, was moving myself forward in that direction.
Awesome. So what are you currently doing? I mean, I know that you're a psychologist and you're still in private practice, a very successful private practice there in New York City. Is that correct?
That is correct. Actually, this year, award-winning psychologist. So
awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. I won a consumer, driven award, stating that my office and my practice, was top notch. And so that to me means everything, because it really indicates that the service that I'm providing is really doing what it's intended to do. So, that's one aspect of who I am professionally. The other aspect of who I am is I also educate. I teach at the college level. Haven't been teaching as much as I want to in the last year and a half, simply because my energy and my resources has been dedicated to creating Latina Mastermind, which is now my baby and my passion. It started with a webinar, the idea of a webinar to teach Latinas how to be more cooperative and collaborative together as opposed to competitive, which is something that women in general struggle with, because we all want to get to the top and we all want to be able to get there, efficiently, effectively, finding our financial legacies and our financial freedom. And so I created this group in the middle of the night, one night, and I said, okay, I'm just going to open up this group because I have to have this webinar titled Latina Mastermind. And so I created a group called Latina Mastermind. I had my 22 girlfriends who went through a leadership program, all Latinas. I put them in the group. One of them happened to have been up that night, and I get an instant message like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get, some people in here so that I can promote the webinar. And so within like 10, 15 minutes, instead of 22, I had 67 individuals in the group. So I kept working, and now I really had to work because now I had to put my mission statement. Now I had to do a lot of things on this group that I was creating. And by the time I went to bed and woke up, which was like 6 a.m, I wound up having 100 and something women in the group. Almost like 160 something. And so as the week went on, I asked another girlfriend, a childhood friend, hey, listen, would you mind spreading the word? I just need kind of some individuals for this webinar I'm doing. And it kind of just began to take momentum. And by the end of the close of the first week, I was at 982 women in this group that was intended to just promote this webinar entitled Latina Mastermind. And so I was a few hours shy, and I reached out to a third girlfriend who actually ran the program. She was kind of behind the scenes and getting all the leadership program. And I said to her, I'm so close to 1,000. I said, it would be amazing if I could hit 1,000. I said, can you tell some friends? I get a text maybe 5 minutes later. Congratulations, 1,001. It's up to you now.
Wow.
And so within 1 week, I was able to gather over 1,000 women into that group that was intended to just solely be a webinar. And so for me, it was very clear that this was not a webinar. This was now my new organization. This was now my new company. And that the need for cooperation and collaboration was desperately desired by individuals. And that the message that I was sending was really a message of, serving and being able to work together. Mm-hmm. And so I took my foot off the accelerator at that point because I knew that I needed to build a company. It was no longer a webinar. And so I've built the last year, between cooperating and collaborating with other people and relationships, I've built a lot of things that I'm proud to be able to offer Latinas. And that included this weekend at Harvard, mm-hmm. to be able to call colleagues and say, listen, I would be honored if you could be on the stage at Harvard. And a lot of them were like, me? What? What are you doing? And I was like, I'm doing this with Harvard, and I would love for you to represent Latinas at Harvard. Yeah. And I have to tell you, being able to offer that to someone is the greatest feeling that you could have. And they delivered more than what I ever could have expected or imagined in the way they delivered. Mm-hmm. And that was very evident by the feedback that we've gotten. And so being able to produce things like that, to be able to go to the White House, to be able to do an initiative with the White House, to be the first person to own the first and only mobile app for Latinas globally in business, where you can network 24 hours a day with anyone around the world about your business and mastermind on that app is, very meaningful for me. Yeah. To be the first and only Latina to launch the first and only podcast on Latina leadership on December 19th of this year is another first. So, I'm creating those tractions of the first, simply because we need to see that it can be done. And I hope never to be the last of anything that I do, but certainly to be the first, inspires me to be able to do this for us.
Well, I mean, being the first, you open up the possibilities for everybody else. It's kind of like that breaking the 4-minute mile. You don't know that it can be done until somebody does it. And that's what you've done, is you're going to open the floodgates and giving permission to other Latinas to do the very same thing.
Exactly. One of the things that we talked about this weekend was when you give yourself permission to shine, mm-hmm. just inevitably you're giving other people permission to shine as well. Exactly. So your light shines on them, and then they're able to take their light and shine on others.
Yeah, that's so true. So talking a little bit about that and kind of segueing into the holidays, because we entitled this how to best handle holiday stress. So, when you let your light shine around the people that, you're usually around, that's normally pretty easy. But a lot of times the holidays bring a lot of stress for people because they might be in environments, even if it's family, that are not that comfortable for them or tend to be not that comfortable. Can you, I know that your profession as a clinical psychologist probably deals a lot with people going and how they deal with the holidays. So what seem to be some of like the top 3 things that people struggle with the most during the holidays, and what are some things that will help alleviate some of those the stress throughout the holiday season?
It's interesting because I begin to, especially clients of mine that I've had for a while, and I know how the holiday impacts them. I begin like September, October. Yeah. Remember, the holidays are coming because they never change, right? Thanksgiving's always at the same time. Christmas is always at the same time. And the 3 things that I find that most individuals struggle with is time, money, and the actual relationships. And so for me, it's about helping individuals manage their time, being able to manage their money and manage their relationships. So it really is about management and understanding how that's impacting them and how their behaviors, if they don't impact them, manage themselves, how it impacts others as well.
Mm-hmm. So what are some common mistakes that people do with those three things?
They overspend their time and they overspend their money, uh, which is huge. People don't understand that time is even more important than money to budget. And why do I say that? Because, there are courses on budgeting, finances, and not enough people take them, but they do exist. A lot of people don't understand how to budget their time. And that causes stress, that causes anxiety, that causes depression, that causes failure, that causes frustration, intolerance for some people.
Yeah.
I mean, the host of psychological ramifications from not managing your time is tremendous, as is with your money.
Yeah.
You put yourself in positions that you should never be in, simply because we want to over deliver when we don't have the bandwidth or the capacity, either with time or with money. And so relationships then get impacted. So that's why I put money and time first,
Yeah.
and relationships next. Because we don't know how to let individuals know that, hey, that doesn't work for me. Cooking a meal for 60 people doesn't work for me. I'm going to have to cook 3 days in a row, and I don't know how to cook maybe, or, you're leaving everything on me and that doesn't work for me. It may be your only day off, and
Yeah.
you put an enormous amount of stress and pressure on yourself that is unnecessary. And so a lot of times what I teach individuals is how to shift your thinking, shift your mindset, shift, and be different. Think outside the box.
Yeah.
What does the holiday really mean for you? And what do you want to gain from that holiday time? And I know that a lot of people are now, rightfully so, complaining about stores opening up on Thanksgiving. I mean, I'm old enough to know that they didn't,
Yeah.
and we still survived, and people still shop the next day. But what we're doing is really taking valuable time from our family of giving thanks. We have to really think about, what is Thanksgiving? What are the holidays? What do they mean to us? There's so many holidays from now until the end of the year. Being able to respect other people's holidays, being able to respect that space that they need. And whether it's a religious holiday or a secular holiday, being able to give back to that individual that you have a relationship with, whether it's your business partner, whether it's your own family, understanding and respecting that boundary becomes very, very important for the relationship.
Yeah, and you bring up really an important point, and I think because of not only the holiday season and the tolerance that we have to have, because there are a lot of different holidays, that are for different faiths and just, run the gamut of different ethnicities as well, the way that we celebrate. And especially after a political storm, the way that we've had and the outcome, I know that there's families that, are in turmoil because they're half Republican, half Democrat, So there's a lot of conflict that's happening now, not only within friends, but also within families. What are some things that you think will really help during this holiday season to kind of temper all the intolerance that we've seen across our nation right now?
Well, it's interesting because I think that from a psychological point of view, when I looked at the results of the election, when you were seeing, I think I was watching, I can't remember, it was MSNBC, the night of the election. And, one of the things that struck me was the population that normally hasn't voted went out to vote. And what you could see across the board was really the pain that everyone in America is experiencing.
Yeah.
Whether you're Republican or Democratic, everyone wants a change. Everyone, depending on your political viewpoints, believes that change can be affected in a different way. But we all are in agreement that we all want change. And so, Tilde, the interesting thing about conflict, and so I want to take a step back just for a second, because what you're talking about is conflict, right? And so what conflict actually does is it arises because both parties are right and both parties are wrong. That's usually when conflict arises. Because you're both right and you're both wrong. And when people can actually see the other person's perspective and point of view, it opens up a whole other world. And you do become more empathic. You are able to understand the other person's point of view a little bit more. You don't have to agree with it, but we must respect it.
Right.
And so with this turmoil, for me, it's seeing all the pain that our country is experiencing, the pain of people not being heard. You know, as an immigrant and coming from an immigrant family, you know, seeing our own countrymen, because again, conceived in Cuba, born in Spain, and made in the USA. Yeah. My heart is here. My home is here. You know, my children are here. And to see our fellow countrymen describe the difficulty that they're having is very similar to the difficulties that immigrant families have had. And so we need to understand the pain from that perspective.
Right.
You know, I would never want someone to feel that their home, their country can't protect them, can't take care of them, because that's what happened with us, right?
Right.
And we had to leave. We had to find somewhere else where we could be protected and where we could actually alleviate some of that pain, create other pains for us because we're no longer home, but a different type of pain. And so that's something that we have to realize, that everyone's in pain. Right. And so at the holiday, we have to be grateful and thankful, especially during Thanksgiving for us here in America, that this is what we're celebrating this week. You know, we must be thankful. We must be appreciative of what we do have, of the differences that do exist, because those differences is what makes people function and work and move forward and makes us be creative. I heard you talk about that creativity. You know, be grateful for that we have that within us and that we can share that with others and that others can share that as well.
Yeah. And, you know, I think for me, it all goes back to communicating either out of love or fear. And so when you communicate out of love, you know, you do listen. And you can have that compassionate or empathetic listening ear to other people's points of view. And like you said, you don't have to agree, but you should respect them for what they're believing. And I think the most frustrating thing for people nowadays is not feeling heard on either side. You know, right. And when you're demeaning somebody for their opinion, you're not hearing them, you know, and therefore they're not going to hear anything that you have to say because you're offending them. So I think it's just a vicious cycle that some people are in, and we've got to stop it and find a way to actually feel that compassion and empathy for people that don't think like us.
And I mean, I have 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
My 4 kids don't think like me. If they did, my house would run much smoother than it does, right? And so people that we love and we cherish don't think like us. And there's nothing wrong with not thinking like us, you know, as long as it's not being harmful. Or to a point where people's lives are being threatened.
Exactly.
That's very, very different. And I want to go back just for a minute because you mentioned, and you've heard me speak on different occasions, right? And coming from your core, coming from that place of love. You know, when you come from that place of love, it doesn't mean that you can't be assertive. It doesn't mean that you can't speak your mind. It just means that you're doing it from a place of strength and a place where you are centered, and you can do it in such a way where whatever the other person is doing or saying to you, you can look at it from that place of strength for you, where your core is dominating. And a lot of us aren't coming from our place of strength and love and core. And that's what we've been seeing, unfortunately. And on the holidays is one of the other areas where we don't come from a place of strength or love or core for a lot of us. Because, again, time and money. And that impacts us. And we have to realize that, you know, what is really to our advantage? You know, what do we really want to gain? How can we shift For my own home, years ago, my oven broke on Thanksgiving as I was cooking this meal. My children were little, and I was almost in tears, right? I was like, oh my gosh, the kids aren't going to eat. What am I going to do? And my husband's like, well, just go get Boston Market. And I was like, what? and so I stood in line in Boston Market. I brought it back because the kids were little. And then the next year he's like, okay, so what are we doing for Thanksgiving? And I was like, you know what? We're going to Boston Market. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
I've always cooked since I was little, since I was like 13, 14. I was the one who made the Thanksgiving meal. And out of nowhere, something shifted with me, and I was like, I want to spend those hours with my kids. I want to go to the movies with them early in the morning and watch a cartoon that they want to see. I want to spend doing an activity. I don't want to spend looking and making sure my turkey doesn't burn. I want to give them my time. I want to be thankful and grateful for them. And, a lot of times my patients will be like, you do what? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. I'm like, that's what I've done for the last few years. And they're like, I wish, believe it or not, people are like, I wish I could do that.
Yeah. I
wish I could let go of what society says Thanksgiving needs to be and be as free as you are for your holiday.
Yeah.
Our holidays are filled with love, with memories, with different expectations of one another as we sit down and we're thankful and grateful for having each other and the day that we've been able to spend together. So again, making that shift and coming from your place of love is always super important.
Yeah. And, I think that's the key, because it doesn't matter what the table looks like, right? It's the attitude and the atmosphere that's created around the table that matters the most.
Absolutely. I would love a home and garden table. And one day I will have that. When I don't have to manage 4 very small kids who all they want to do is spend time with mommy. Yeah. And that for me is more important than making sure that there's a 15-pound turkey. As a family, we actually give back to the community. So a lot of our shopping goes back to the community. It isn't for our home. Yeah. And so we do a lot of these things that for us give back to us in so many ways. Mm-hmm. And makes our Thanksgiving really, really ours.
Yeah. And one of the most memorable Thanksgivings that I've had has been volunteering and going and feeding the homeless, and not going home for Thanksgiving, but actually serving. So if you're thinking about doing that, I would highly recommend it to anyone that's watching this, because it is such an incredible experience, and you leave something like that just feeling even more grateful for what you do have.
Exactly. We had Hurricane Sandy several years ago, which was kind of right by Thanksgiving. My office is in Staten Island. Staten Island was hit pretty hard. A lot of people lost. There were some lives lost here. There were homes lost. There was electricity that was out through the holiday. And I had a student from one of the colleges where I teach, muster enough energy and say, hey, can people cook? Whose ever oven is working, can you cook? We have families here that can't have any meals. And so I responded back and I was like, count me in. And my whole family, we wound up cooking the night before that morning. We had this amazing spread, and, my mom's family friends were coming over and they were like, oh my God, this looks so great. I was like, don't touch it. It's not ours. And it was the greatest feeling to be able to pack all that up with the love that everyone, including the kids, did, and be able to serve someone else and make someone understand that someone other that they had no clue was there, cared enough about them to make sure that they had their meal.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Isaura, and as well as the tidbits of wisdom on how to cope with some stress that we might be creating actually for ourselves, as we look at our own circumstances in our own lives. So I appreciate your time, and I'm grateful for you. To everybody watching, I'm grateful this holiday season, this Thanksgiving week, especially for your continued support and you watching our Tuesdays with Tilde, as well as all of the other shows that we've produced are real women, real stories, real inspiration, talking to women who have paved their own way to success and are living life the way that they chose to do so. I want to also encourage you that if you like what you're seeing, please share it with others and help us spread the word about what we're doing. We'd really appreciate it. We're almost up to about 13,000 followers this year and have just grown leaps and bounds because of you. And we couldn't have done it without you. So I'm eternally grateful for you, your support, your continued encouragement, for all the private messages that you've sent me throughout the year, encouraging me to continue to do so, and also wanting to be a part of Womanars as well. So thank you, and I pray that all of you have an incredible and wonderful Thanksgiving this year. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.